Ladies and gentlemen, I would be grateful if you take a few moments to listen to the following short safety announcement. On hearing the fire alarm, we would ask everyone to evacuate the building immediately. Please leave in a calm and orderly manner using the exits which are located at the front and the rear of the hall. Then make your way to the assembly point at the front of the physics building located at the car park side of the hall, which is opposite the main building. We would ask you to remain there until instructed otherwise. Please do not attempt to re-enter the building, even if the alarms have been silenced, as this does not always mean the emergency is over. I would also like to take this opportunity to ask you to silence all mobile phones now. Thank you.
I'm pleased to announce that the two governments and the political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
Even now, this will not work unless in your will and in your mind you make it work.
It's a day we should treasure, a day when agreement and accommodation have taken the place of difference and division.
In the days to come, there may be those who will try to undermine this great achievement, not only with words, but perhaps also with violence.
I'm very happy for people in Northern Ireland. A lot of people have talked about a new beginning. I hope and believe it will be. I'm sure the positive news of today will continue to be built on.
I look forward to the future. I see a great opportunity there for us to start a healing process here in Northern Ireland.
It's only on the basis of equality, fairness and respect for our differences that we can begin to heal the deep divisions between our people.
These negotiations and the new arrangements are part of our collective journey from the failures of the past towards a future together as equals.
I am convinced that we have taken a step today of which we can be proud. We are giving something to the future.
It's about recognising the need to encompass all attitudes and all opinions, all religions, all creeds, all colours, sexes, disabilities, within a diverse and honourable society.
We have interrupted the culture of failure in Northern Ireland. There is no going back.
Yes, 71.12%.
First Minister in Northern Ireland and First Deputy First Minister in Northern Ireland.
Please welcome to the stage your host for today, Andrea Catherwood.
A very good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to the Sir William Whitla Hall at Queen's University, Belfast, for the first day of Agreement 25, the Dynamics of Peace. Today's a really special day as we join together to mark 25 years since the signing of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I'm Andrea Catherwood, and I'm going to be your host to guide you through today's events. I'm a broadcaster for BBC Radio 4 based in London, and like a number of reporters from Northern Ireland, I left and I went on to become a foreign correspondent and live and work around the world. But I learned my trade here in Belfast. In fact, the first documentary I ever made was for BBC Radio 4 called Coming of Age. It was the 18th anniversary of the start of the Troubles, and I was 18 years old. The point of the documentary was to ask what was it like to grow up and reach adulthood having never known peace. So I interviewed other 18-year-olds about their experiences. You can probably imagine some of the events that shaped those young lives and our fears for the future. I can't tell you how heartening it is to have seen recent media coverage about those born not like me when the Troubles started, but when they ended. When the Good Friday Agreement was signed, those peace babies, those who have never grown up knowing the kind of violence that we lived through. Perfect? Absolutely not. Transformational? Yes. And that agreement, of course, would not have been possible without many of the distinguished guests and inspiring speakers that we're going to hear from today. In a moment, I'm going to invite our first speakers to come on stage. And in this opening session, we're going to hear from President and Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University, Professor Ian Greer, Hilary Rodham Clinton, Chancellor of Queen's University Belfast, Emma Murphy, President of Queen's Students' Union, and Senator George J. Mitchell with his wife Heather. So please join me in welcoming our first speakers to the stage. Well, I'd like to invite President and Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University, Professor Ian Greer, to officially open the conference. Ian.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, I offer you a very warm welcome to Queen's University this morning, and today, the first day of our conference, Agreement 25. It's good that we're here together to mark that occasion. Each day, the Agreement 25 conference has a theme, and the theme today is Reflect. So I'm really delighted that we have so many distinguished guests, speakers and panelists visiting the university, contributors who can speak with the authority born from making the agreement a reality. We'll reflect not only on the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, but also on the peace and prosperity of the last 25 years. With today's theme of reflection, we think on the huge milestone that was reached when the Belfast Good Friday Agreement was signed. A critically important milestone on a journey, but as many have said, it's not our final destination. Rather, the agreement is a set of tools that can help us overcome the challenges on our path. Sadly, there are still some events that emphasise the fact that we remain on that journey. Events that bring us right back to those painful memories of the past, notably the recent attempt on the life of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell. The solidarity shown by our Northern Ireland politicians following that event sent an important signal. Strong confirmation of their commitment to a peaceful future, peace that will bring prosperity. That reflection reminds me of the words of one of our greatest alumni, Seamus Heaney. Hope is not optimism which expects things to turn out well, but something rooted in the conviction that there is good worth doing. As we reflect on the last 25 years, we can see that good. It's become the reality of our everyday life in Northern Ireland. That good came from the hard work of many leaders. Leaders who were central either to creating the agreement or to delivering the lasting impact over 25 years. Without their vision, their conviction, their tenacity and indeed their bravery, it simply would not have happened. We will hear much about them and their achievements over the course of today, and there are too many to mention individually in a short speech, but it would be remiss not to call out the leadership of Senator George Mitchell, our former Chancellor. And we're delighted that Senator Mitchell and we're really delighted, of course, that Senator Mitchell is with us in person for this event. We're also proud that Queen's is an anchor institution for Northern Ireland, and we're part of that journey. Queen's is a place that transforms lives. It transforms lives through education, through innovation that drives economic growth, and importantly, as a forum to share different views, to challenge them and to respectfully debate, and in doing so, to come together. The conference epitomises that role for our university. By working together, we can change the lives of young people. At Queen's, we believe that it's a student's ability, potential and commitment to learning that comes first, not their personal or social circumstances. Our Pathway Opportunity programme really does make a difference. It has reached into disadvantaged communities across Northern Ireland and helped support over 800 students transition to higher education. Our inclusive approach also extends to community-based projects, such as in the markets of the Greater Shankill, because we believe that partnership is key to the success of an inclusive society. So over the next 3 days, we'll reflect on the past and renew our commitment to collaboration, our commitment to partnership, our commitment to peace. And we'll reimagine the future as we journey from the history of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement to our hope for the future. In the words of Seamus Heaney, over these 3 days we will see hope and history rhyme. Now, the focus of any university is, of course, our students. They're our future. And over the past year, it's been a great privilege for me to work with an outstanding president of our Students' Union. So it's with great pleasure that I hand you over now to Emma Murphy, President of the Queen's University Students' Union.
Ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests and friends, I am absolutely privileged to be speaking to you on this celebration for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. This conference is rightly being hosted by Queen's University, as I know that for so many from here, university is a chance to meet people from different backgrounds. Whether it's in the classroom or over a pint or two in the Students' Union, it's still many people's first chance to experience true integrated education. Today, I want to specifically pay homage to the contributions that the student movement has made to the peace process. For decades, students have been at the forefront of advocacy and activism through peaceful protest, rallies, and calling for the end of violence. In 1972, the forming of the National Student Union in Northern Ireland, NUS-USI, was one of the first institutions to work across the UK and Ireland, and has been regarded by many as the blueprint for the Good Friday Agreement in how it has collectively brought students together as a force for good against sectarianism. From civil rights to participating in the Yes campaign for the 1998 referendum, the student movement has been key at putting pressure on political parties to get in the room with each other and has shown the importance of standing up for what you believe in. The student movement today is still integral to creating change and challenging the status quo. As president of the Students' Union, young people that I speak to have no doubt in their mind about peace. For us, there is no going back. Instead, their minds are focused on the issues of today, the cost of living crisis, housing, climate change, job opportunities. There's no doubt that the past quarter of a century, has improved conditions here, but there's still much further to go. In 2023, we should not be living in damp houses, relying on food banks, or being forced to work long hours. Young people should not be disenfranchised by politics here and reluctant to get involved. I myself am a peace baby. At 23 years old, I've been born and raised in Belfast my whole life. For me, so much of the Troubles has been a ghost story, to steal the quote from Derry Girls. Instead of going through violence myself, I've grown up hearing from my dad about the violence and intimidation he suffered through in rural Dromore and the relief he felt every single night closing up his dad's bar. I've heard from my mum questions of why on earth she moved to Belfast from Dublin in the 90s when there was a shooting in the area on the first night that she moved up here. Just to say they are both fine now and in the audience doing well. To so many in the room, activists, elected representatives, people working in communities, I'm forever indebted to you. Thank you. Conferences and historical moments like these are a golden opportunity, not only to reflect on the past, but to build for the future. The Good Friday Agreement required difficult conversations and brave leadership, and that is exactly what is needed again. Without a functioning government, the lack of decision-making is failing future generations instead of building upon the developments that Northern Ireland has made. Let this anniversary be the impetus for action against stagnation and towards progress. Let the lesson be that change is not one moment or one group of people. Let us keep moving forward. I will now invite our Chancellor, Hilary Rodham Clinton, to speak. As one of the most recognised female politicians in the world, her role in peace building in Northern Ireland was integral by not only championing the work of the Women's Coalition, but by going into local working class communities and speaking to women there and building peace. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Welcome to Queen's University Agreement 25 Conference. And thank you, Emma, for those important words and for representing the students, the 25,000 students of Queen's at this historic gathering. Because it's so appropriate since this is truly about the futures of the young people of Northern Ireland, who are the true subjects of our gathering today. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Greer, for your visionary leadership of the university, and a special thank you to George Mitchell, an esteemed former Chancellor of Queen's, as well as a colleague and friend. America and Northern Ireland were well served throughout the long public service of George Mitchell and the long road to peace under his capable leadership. He rightfully earned not only the respect, but also the trust of participants on all sides. I was pleased to work with him at the State Department, and I am so delighted he will share his reflections with you today. It is also an honor to be joined by so many important participants of the Good Friday Agreement and its aftermath, who you will hear from over the next 3 days. The Lord Mayor of Belfast, Tony Blair, Blair And Ahern, Bill Clinton, all of whom will be speaking. The conference co-chairs, Ryan Feeney and Professor Richard English, as well as distinguished faculty of this university, students, alumni, and guests from around the world. On the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, I think we can all agree to celebrate a significant milestone with both a sense of accomplishment, but also of hope and determination that the next 25 years will bring more fully the peace, prosperity, and safety the agreement promised. Now, there can be no doubt that people in Northern Ireland today enjoy safety and security much more than those who had lived through the previous decades that they could have only dreamed of. And the longevity of the Good Friday Agreement remains a true triumph of diplomacy and a testament to democracy's power to transcend divisions and deliver peace. But it is primarily a testament to a lot of tough, determined, everyday people who refused to go back to the days of division and violence. This first day of the conference is titled Reflect, as we hear from the architects of the 1998 Belfast Agreement. Tomorrow is titled Renew, as we discuss what should be done to fulfill the promise of the agreement. And day 3 is to reimagine the economic prospects for Northern Ireland, especially in light of the Windsor Agreement framework. So you will hear from the architects soon, but first, let me just make a few points about what we are celebrating and about the work that remains. I think all of us know how difficult it was to secure the Good Friday Agreement, how much work and sacrifice it took on all sides to bring about peace, and how much effort has gone into implementing its tenets and building a new government in Northern Ireland. The credit for peace ultimately goes to the brave people of Northern Ireland, who took risks for peace. I well remember Bill's and my first trip here in 1995, the first time a sitting United States president visited Northern Ireland. And after the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in front of Belfast City Hall, in the midst of that enormous crowd where so many of the people gathered were holding the hands of their children or holding smaller children on their shoulders, we gathered right here in Whitla Hall. Catholic leadership stood on one side of the room, Protestants stood on the other. It was not easy for them to reach across that literal, physical divide. It took years of building trust, and it took courage. Bill and I moved back and forth between them, meeting and talking with them. We understood then that making peace and making peace endure would require patience and follow through, and would take time. I remember also on a visit in 2009 when I was Secretary of State, talking with Martin McGuinness and Peter Robinson as they worked through thorny challenges of governing together. That took courage too. And of course, there wouldn't be a Good Friday Agreement to celebrate today if it were not for the women of Northern Ireland. I well remember starting in 1995, meeting with Protestant and Catholic women, mothers and daughters, sisters, aunts, friends who may have attended different churches on Sunday, but 7 days a week prayed that their husbands and their sons, their friends would come back and forth from work, from shopping peacefully, prayed for a better future for their children and grandchildren. Women like the late Mo Molam, Inez McCormick, Pat Hume, determined, unstoppable forces for peace. And Joyce McCartan, who brought together Protestant and Catholic women in a safe house where they realized they all wanted the same things: good jobs, good schools, peaceful, secure neighborhoods, streets you could walk safely down, security and prosperity you could count on to build a life, and human rights. Women like Brona Hines, Monica McWilliams, Jane Morris, and Pearl Sager, who formed their own political party in 1996 in order to participate in the formal peace negotiations. A quarter century of bloodshed and strife, and millennia of embedded sexism had discouraged most women from being in politics, from being in the arena, but not them. One of the goals of this conference is to recognize the role that women played and are playing in peace building. And we're also here to amplify the voices of the next generation of leaders and to create a dialogue to address the major issues impacting society today so we can keep building on the current peace over the next 25 years. Because while the Good Friday Agreement is an enormous achievement, we know that peace, prosperity, and progress that so many have worked tirelessly to achieve remains incomplete. The work of integration in housing and schools is far from finished. Neighborhoods remain divided. Poverty and unemployment persist. The difficulties of the past continue to threaten the present. You know we are at a standstill with the Northern Ireland Assembly no longer functioning. But the Windsor Agreement provides a path forward, not just for convening, but for positioning Northern Ireland as an economic hub for global trade and investment through privileged access to the UK and all of its trading partners, as well as the EU. Now, there have been many moments in Northern Ireland's peace journey where progress seemed difficult, when every route forward looked blocked. There seemed nowhere to go. But you have always found a way through, and I believe you will again, because the stakes for the people of Northern Ireland are so high. You stand as an example to the world of how even the staunchest adversaries can overcome differences to work together for the common and greater good. So I encourage everyone now to move forward with the same spirit of unstoppable grit and resolve that brought the peace 25 years ago. Your friends in the United States will be behind you all the way as you work toward peace, prosperity, and stability that lasts. So that is what we are here to discuss over the next 3 days. This forum will provide a chance for leaders who created the agreement and those working to extend it and realize its full promise to share their experiences and visions for the future. What I find so remarkable about being here at Queen's is that many of the 25,000 students were born after the Good Friday Agreement was signed. Yet they study together in Maclay Library. They play sports and join clubs together. They have those long, deep conversations you have at university late into the night. The ordinary activities of students all over the world. But when considered in the context of Northern Ireland's history, the idea of young people from all communities, unionists and nationalists, Republicans and loyalists, becoming one another's friends, classmates, and mentors, it's clear there's nothing ordinary at all about what has been built here at Queen's. And what an example and model it sets for not just Northern Ireland, but the rest of us. Because Queen's mission is transformation of knowledge and learning of individuals and societies, of leaving its mark on history and the world. Consider the motto of both the university and Belfast, taking from Psalms 116. What shall we give in return for so much? The answer has been clear from the beginning: as much as we can. And one of the driving reasons to resume the government, to get about the business of governing, is that right now 33% of school leavers in Northern Ireland leave to seek their futures elsewhere, taking with them their skills, their education, their ambitions, their dreams. The ongoing struggle to finish the Good Friday Agreement and claim its full promise is a reminder of one of the things I try to remember in my life when I've been really high or really low. There are no final victories or defeats in life. The most important thing is to fight the right fight and to keep doing it the best you can for as long as you can. I want to leave you with one final story. 3 years after my first visit to Northern Ireland, I helped organize the Vital Voices Conference of Women in Belfast at the new International Conference Centre. Women who were coming together in public to find solutions to the conflict, to contribute to a lasting peace. As I spoke from the podium, I looked up and I saw the leaders of Sinn Féin sitting in the front row of the balcony. And right behind them, I saw the leaders of the DUP. At the time, the parties and the individuals were not speaking to each other. But the fact that they were both in the same room at a women's conference for peace exemplified their openness to listening, to compromising, to agreeing on a better future for the place they all cherished. We cannot take the progress we've seen for granted. It's what a 15-year-old boy named Mark Lennox from Glengormley High School wrote in a letter to my husband in 1995. He wrote, "If Northern Ireland is to have a future, then we must all work hard for peace and make a real effort. We will have to change our ideas and work for change." That is the choice the people of Northern Ireland made in 1998, and it is the choice I hope you will continue to make. This 25th anniversary is the opportunity so many generations have worked toward and waited for, to give the people of Northern Ireland the future they deserve, especially for their children and grandchildren. So let's get to work to see that men and women join together to make the world, as well as Northern Ireland, better for the next 25 years and 25 after that. Godspeed.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here to witness this historic anniversary. May it be the first of many. Thank you for your very warm reception. It's a great honor and a pleasure for me and my wife Heather to be here with you today. I'm especially grateful to the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor and his staff here at Queen's University. They've worked long and hard to organize this week's events. They've welcomed all of us, the citizens of Northern Ireland, teachers, school children, media, politicians, all of us with extraordinary warmth and hospitality. Thank you, Hillary and Ian, for what you've done in organizing this conference. 25 years ago, the people of Northern Ireland and their leaders changed the course of history. It was a day when history opened itself to hope. The people of Northern Ireland supported, worked for, and established a democratic, peaceful process as their preferred form of governance. They overwhelmingly rejected political violence as a way to resolve their differences. If history teaches us anything, it is that history itself is never finished. On the evening the agreement was reached, I commended the men and women who wrote and signed it. But I also said that it would take other leaders in the future to safeguard and extend their work. And so it has. I am here with many others to sound that bell one more time. Life is change for every human being, for every family, for every government, for every society. All human beings, every single one of us, is fallible, as are all human organizations and institutions. And in human affairs, the answer to every problem contains within it the seeds of a new problem. Today, a quarter century after the agreement, the people of Northern Ireland continue to wrestle with their doubts, their differences, their disagreements. This, of course, is only natural, and they will continue to do so no matter how successful their political leaders are. The answer is not perfection or permanence. It is now, as it was then, for the current and future leaders of Northern Ireland to act with courage and vision, as their predecessors did 25 years ago, to find workable answers to the daily problems of the present, to preserve peace, to leave to the next generation peace, freedom, opportunity, and the hope of a better future for their children. One of the strengths of democracy is the right of all citizens to publicly disagree with and to criticize their government officials and their policies. But all values, when carried to extremes, can become vices. So if there's one bit of unsolicited advice I'd like to give to the people of Northern Ireland, it's this: don't always be so hard on yourselves. At the same time, never, ever give up on the belief that we all can do better and be better. The future becomes the present in a heartbeat. 6 years ago, I made one of my many visits to Northern Ireland. The United Kingdom was wrestling with Brexit, and in the United States, we had just elected President Trump. While I was here, I was asked several times essentially the same question: can you comment on how terrible and upsetting the politics are here in Northern Ireland? So much anger, so much disagreement, so much distrust. In reply, I said, well, I can't speak for the UK, but I've just come from the United States, and I don't think any American is in a position to lecture others on their disagreements. I spoke those words 6 years ago, and they're even more relevant today. I do acknowledge, with a nod to the great sense of humor that often accompanies it, that people in Northern Ireland are quick to take offense. I was made aware of this quite dramatically in June of 1996 on the very first day of the all-party talks. In a large conference room filled with delegates from the two governments and 10 political parties, David Irvine, in a loud voice, shouted across the room to me. "Senator," he said, "if you are to be of any use to us, there is one thing you must understand." "What is it?" I asked. With a smile on his face, he replied, "We in Northern Ireland will drive 100 miles out of our way to receive an insult." Like you, I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But as I looked around the room, they weren't laughing. They were all nodding in agreement. Over the next few years, I witnessed firsthand the unique skill of Northern Ireland politicians in the art of insulting their opponents. But a wise person can always be superior to the insults he or she receives. Wisdom and courage and grace and even stubborn desire can help to sow peace and root it down deep in the soil where it can once again grow. So I say now to the current and future leaders of Northern Ireland, there is much in your history and in your politics that divides you, but there also is much that can bring you together, that can inspire you to continue what your predecessors began a quarter century ago. It is not a sign of weakness to resolve your differences by democratic and peaceful means. To the contrary, it is a sign of strength and of wisdom. And it clearly reflects the will of the overwhelming majority of the people of Northern Ireland. Yes, they often disagree, sometimes very strongly. Yes, they may take offense quickly, but it is unmistakably clear that the people of Northern Ireland do not want to return to violence, not now and not ever. I know that each of your parties, like all political parties in the world, have some of what I call the 100%ers. They want everything their way all the time. To them, any compromise is a sign of weakness. But I say to you that reasoned, principled compromise is essential, especially in divided societies, and it reflects a belief in democratic values, that we all are in this together. There is great depth in recognizing that the only way to help us emerge from the rubble of conflict is that we must learn to understand one another. We don't need to love one another. We don't even need to like one another, although we hope we could. But we must learn to understand one another and to be able to say yes to one another, especially when the quicker and easier answer is no. Because like it or not, we are all in this together. Facing the reality of the future rather than clinging to the myths of the past takes strength and courage and vision. Those we honor today showed those qualities a quarter of a century ago. they will be forever remembered, and others will be remembered as well. One grim but tangible memory is in these statistics. According to the Northern Ireland Police Service and the Northern Ireland Statistics Agency, from the start of the Troubles until 1998, over 3,500 people were killed and an estimated 50,000 were injured in sectarian violence. In the 25 years since the agreement was reached, there have been about 164 security-related deaths. But don't think of these just as numbers, because they are not. Think of them as mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, whose lives were cut short or permanently impaired. Still, to this day, their lives echo down through the years. And so I ask each and every person in this hall to stand and honor all of these lives, and every one was an individual human being. All of these lives with a moment of silence. Please stand. Thank you. Please be seated. There have been many architects in the House of Peace. It is impossible to name them all. They, of course, include President and Secretary Clinton. I'm very grateful to President Clinton for appointing me to serve as his representative in Northern Ireland and for his unswerving support for me and for the people of Northern Ireland during the long years of failure that followed until we got an agreement. Prime Ministers Blair and Ahern were absolutely indispensable to the process, as were other leaders of the UK and Irish governments. Many of their predecessors helped to lay the foundations for peace. They include Albert Reynolds and John Bruton in Ireland and John Major in the United Kingdom. Major and Bruton made the crucial decisions to establish the all-party talks and to invite the independent chairman to head that process. I shared that role with two extraordinary men, the late Harry Holkeri, the former Prime Minister of Finland, and General John de Chastelain, the former head of the Canadian Defense Forces. Each of us was well served by small but very able staffs. For me, they included Martha Pope, David Pozorski, and Kelly Curry. Both governments were represented by a succession of very able ministers and officials. They included from the UK Lord Patrick Mayhew, Sir Michael Ancram, Mo Mowlam, Lord Paul Murphy, Jonathan Powell, and Bill Jeffries. From Ireland, Dick Spring, David Andrews, Sean O'Higgin, Liz O'Donnell, David Cooney, Tim O'Connor, and David Donahue. Special recognition must, of course, go to the leaders of the major Northern Ireland parties. John Hume led the Social Democratic and Labour Party, and David Trimble led the Ulster Unionist Party. Without John Hume, there would not have been a peace process. Without David Trimble, there would not have been a peace agreement. they were justly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Lord Trimble later served as the First Minister of the Northern Ireland government. In the UUP, he was greatly aided by several key officials, among them Lord Reg Empey, Lord John Taylor, Lord Ken McGuinness, and Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. In the SDLP, John Hume received strong support from several talented leaders, including Seamus Mallon, a brilliant orator and negotiator who later became Deputy First Minister, and Mark Durkan, Brid Rogers, and Sean Farron. Gerry Adams and the late Martin McGuinness led Sinn Féin into and through the entire process. They were assisted by Jerry Kelly, Barbara de Bruyn, and Alex Maskey, who is now the Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly. They were all and always strong and effective advocates for their cause. Later, McGuinness served for several years as Deputy First Minister. Dr. Ian Paisley was a long-time and strong leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. The DUP withdrew from the talks and opposed the agreement, but they later re-entered the process at crucial talks in St. Andrews and thereafter participated actively in governance. Dr. Paisley served for several years as First Minister, where he and Martin McGuinness achieved some celebrity as the Chuckles brothers. Paisley was succeeded as DUP leader and First Minister by Peter Robinson, who had been a very effective negotiator while the DUP was in the talks. They, Paisley and Robinson, were ably assisted in the talks by Nigel Dodds and Ian Paisley, Jr. The Alliance Party was led by Dr. John Alderdice. He and his colleagues were very effective in the talks, and he later served with distinction as the first Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly. And his colleague, Eileen Bell, also later served in that same role. The Northern Ireland Women's Party, led by Monica McWilliams and Pearl Sager, played a vital role, as indeed did all of the women in all of the coalitions that stitched the threads of peace together. The Loyalist parties were small in number, but they played a very large role in the negotiations. Their leaders were David Irvine and Gary McMichael. Both were outstanding and powerful advocates for peace. They were assisted by other articulate leaders like Billy Hutchinson and Dawn Purvis. The Labour Party was effectively led by Malachy Curran. With the perspective of a quarter century, the strength of these leaders and the people they represented has become clear. Their places in history have been assured. I now know them all as friends. The only thing that gives me pause about reading this long list of honorees is that in the dust of my memory, I likely have inadvertently left out some who should have been included. And if so, I sincerely and profoundly apologize. So I'd like to now ask you to stand again to applaud these courageous men and women who brought peace to Northern Ireland with a sound that will ring out for years to come. The course of every true idea ends up eventually in the obvious. Peace is a true idea. It must belong to us all. It can be in some ways more difficult than war, but it must be pursued. It is our task, the task of our children and of their children, to ensure this peace so that history continues to open itself to hope. Speaking of children, in October of 1997, my wife Heather gave birth to our son Andrew. By then, I had been involved in Northern Ireland for nearly 3 years. The all-party talks had been going on for a year and a half, and there had been no meaningful progress. Actually, no progress of any kind. In many respects, the talks were about reciting and repeating history rather than changing it. The ceasefires were routinely violated. Some parties entered late, some left early. The anger, the hostility, the obstacles all seemed endless. Over and over again, I was asked, "Senator, since you have failed to get an agreement, when are you leaving Northern Ireland to go home?" Earlier that year, after an especially difficult period, Heather and I briefly discussed that question. I told her I wanted to stay, and she agreed. So I returned, and as I had always done, I answered that same question day after day, saying that while it was true that we hadn't gotten an agreement, I still felt it worthwhile to continue the effort to try to end the violence. But then our son, Andrew, was born. And as every parent knows, my life and my responsibilities would change irreversibly. I flew home for his birth, and I also made plans to travel to Washington to meet with President Clinton's National Security Advisor. My intention was to tell him that I was, for the first time, seriously considering leaving Northern Ireland, to ask for his reaction and advice, to request a meeting with the President to discuss the matter. I had continued my close relationship with President Clinton as he and Mrs. Clinton maintained a deep concern and an intense personal interest in Northern Ireland. My wife, Heather, had to remain in the hospital with Andrew for a few days. So it was there that we had a long and somber talk about the future. I had asked and was told that on the day of Andrew's birth, 61 children were born in Northern Ireland. We talked about what Andrew's life might be like and about the lives of the 61 children from Northern Ireland. Then I told Heather that I was going to Washington and why. Her reaction was immediate and strong. She said, "You have to go back until it ends one way or the other. If you leave now when the fighting resumes and lots of people die, you'll never be able to forgive yourself. Go back, give it one last try. I'll take good care of Andrew. You think about those 61 children from Northern Ireland." So I canceled the trip to Washington and returned to Northern Ireland. And when I got back to Belfast, I felt like I was coming home. But coming home doesn't always mean returning to safety. Unfortunately, the situation continued to deteriorate. Just before Christmas of 1997, I met with the party leaders to try to get them to agree on a statement of the major issues to be resolved. Mind you, this was not trying to get agreement on the answers to any questions. It was, after a year and a half of discussion, just to get them to agree on the wording of the issues that were to be resolved. At first, the meeting was amicable and positive. Then suddenly, the mood turned intensely negative. The old resentments returned, the insults resumed, and the meeting broke up in anger and acrimony. For the first time, I felt a sense of defeat. Then it quickly got even worse. A few days later, just after Christmas, a prominent loyalist paramilitary leader was killed while in prison. That touched off a round of retaliatory violence that threatened to end the talks and to plunge Northern Ireland back into the troubles. The next series of meetings, some in London in January and in Dublin in February, were not in any sense negotiations. To the contrary, they became outlets for anger, for hostility, and the desire for revenge, as each side blamed the other for the escalating violence. Two parties were suspended from the talks. As we left Dublin, the mood was negative and the outlook bleak. So much effort seemed to be going down the drain of history. On the flight back to the U.S., my sense of defeat and despair deepened. And then I recalled Heather's words, "One last try." I took out a pad of paper and I wrote down the draft of a plan for a final intensive effort with an early, unbreakable deadline. I talked with my two colleagues, Prime Minister Holkry and General de Chastelain. They were in full agreement. When we returned to Belfast in March, we entered into discussions with the two governments and the 8 political parties still in the talks to get an agreement on an early, unbreakable deadline for an end to the talks one way or the other. That discussion was long and difficult, but finally in late March we got agreement on 2 weeks of final negotiations and, crucially, an unbreakable deadline. My sense of despair gave way to a sense of hope for one important reason. We, the independent chairman, had no authority to impose a deadline. We could propose it as we had, but it required the approval of both governments and of each party. The fact that every party still in the talks agreed to the deadline meant to me that they were sincere in wanting an end to the conflict, despite their deep differences and the nearly 2 years of unproductive haggling they'd just been through. They still faced very difficult issues on which they had strongly conflicting views, but they did not want to return to the violence of the past. And the only way to do that was to reach an agreement. There was another reason for my hopes, personal to me and much less serious. I'd been involved in Northern Ireland for more than 3 years, but I still had a hard time understanding some of what was being said in the negotiations. I'd spent 15 years in the United States Senate, the last 6 as the Senate's leader. The debates were vigorous, but orderly, one speaker at a time. Here, especially in the early years, there was disorder. Delegates from 10 political parties hurled insults back and forth, shouted at and insulted each other, and some regularly and loudly stormed out in protest. I learned that the dramatic walkout is a major feature of political life in Northern Ireland. And the only thing that reminded me of the Senate was that some people spoke often and at very great length. It took a long time to establish an orderly process. Along the way, I made many mistakes. One of them was at the beginning of the talks, and it was in a naive and misguided effort on my part to be helpful. As a politician myself, I knew that all of them, politicians, liked to talk, and none of them liked to listen. So I foolishly said to them, if no one else will listen to you, I will be here. You will be heard. How I regretted that over the next... It wasn't weeks, it wasn't months, it was years that I listened to the same people saying the same thing over and over and over again. And many of them talked very fast with accents that I couldn't quite figure out. So to improve my understanding, I held many, many hundreds of informal meetings in my office and theirs where I said little and listened as much as possible. Listening, really listening to someone else speak, is hard, especially when it goes on for years. But it's also a sign of respect, and I respected them for what they were trying to do. By a fortunate coincidence, this effort began to pay off in the lengthy discussions to establish a deadline. So as we began the last 2 intensive weeks, I was encouraged by the fact that finally I could understand everything that was being said. More importantly, the long period of listening greatly helped me in the search for common ground. We set a deadline of midnight, Thursday, April 9. We didn't meet that deadline, and we also failed to meet the targets we had set for each of the 14 days of the final effort. My memory of those 2 weeks is a blur of constant activity as 2 governments, 8 political parties, and the independent chairman sought a written agreement on which all could agree on 3 complex and related relationships within Northern Ireland, between Northern Ireland, and between Ireland and the United Kingdom. My admiration grew for the men and women who struggled to find common ground against a history of distrust, disagreement, and violence, to the limits of their physical capacity and under enormous political pressure. On the last week, Prime Ministers Blair and Ahern came to Belfast and assumed active and highly effective leadership in the talks. On the last night, President Clinton stayed up all night in the White House talking to the prime ministers and to the party leaders. By the morning of Friday, April 10th, we had assembled the product of all of these efforts into a single document. 2 years earlier, at the beginning of the talks, I had told the delegates that if there was ever to be an agreement, it had to be theirs. No acceptable agreement could be imposed from above or from outside. As we distributed the final document to them that morning, I reminded them of that statement orally and in writing. I said to them, virtually every word in this document has been spoken or written by someone from Northern Ireland. This is your agreement. It is of necessity a compromise. It does not resolve every issue. There is much in it you will not like. There is much you will like. But this is the end. Now you must decide. And I asked each of them, please say yes. Each of the parties then went into caucus. Through the day, they debated the future of their homeland, of their constituents, of their families. Their questions and concerns were many and varied. The prime ministers tried to answer their questions, to reassure them, to encourage their approval. By the afternoon, the final calls started coming in, at first a trickle, then a rush, and then there was a lull as I waited for the last call. Shortly before 5, David Trimble called me. I will never forget his words. We're ready to do the business. The party leaders and the government officials gathered in the large conference room, already crowded with reporters, television crews, staff, many others. I had suggested an immediate vote to be followed by a discussion. Nobody objected or disagreed, but in the excitement of the moment, they just started talking, and they went on until everyone had their say. I realized that my suggestion was wishful thinking, and the discussion continued until they were ready to vote. That was fitting because it was their agreement. It still is, and it always will be, theirs and yours, so that history continues to open itself to hope. In the future, politicians will tell it one way, the poets will tell it another, and the history books still yet another. But it's likely that none of us will say it in precisely the way that our grandchildren and their children will understand it. What has led us here has not been perfect. What surrounds us now is not guaranteed. And what will lead us on is the ability to recognize the faults of the past and the dreams of the future. The agreement reached in 1998 did not resolve all of the outstanding issues. It was a political compromise, the best that could be achieved at that time. In the years since the agreement, there have been many chronicles describing those momentous events. Many individuals have been lauded for their efforts, and appropriately so. I believe it clear that the greatest heroes were the people of Northern Ireland and their political leaders. In the most difficult and dangerous of circumstances, those leaders acted with courage, with vision, and determination. At one time or another, all were criticized or rebuked. Some lost their public offices. Some of their political parties suffered huge declines. But most remarkable feats often suffer setbacks. I'm immensely favorable to the people of Ireland, North and South, and their leaders. Peace may come dropping slowly, but when it settles, it confirms the humanity in all of us. Triggered by this anniversary, there has been much discussion recently about the agreement. Of course, everyone is entitled to, indeed encouraged, to express their views. Some in and out of Northern Ireland have criticized the agreement because it did not solve every problem and because there continued to be in Northern Ireland some failure, disappointment, dispute, disagreement. But I respectfully disagree with these critics. I believe the statistics on deaths and injuries I cited earlier are by themselves a powerful response to such comments. Those who advocate such views are in effect holding Northern Ireland to an impossibly high standard that no other society could meet or does meet. What society doesn't have violence? What society doesn't have some criminals, including some masquerading as patriots? What society doesn't have disagreements, disputes, some disarray? And I say, as a visitor and a friend, Northern Ireland is a good place. The people are good people. They're energetic, they're hardworking, they're hospitable. They're trying to do what's right even as they disagree on its definition. They want peace. Going forward, Let's accentuate the positive in Northern Ireland. We need not eliminate the negative. Let's just keep it in perspective. My final words today are intensely personal. As many of you know, 3 years ago, I was hospitalized with acute leukemia. To this day, I continue to receive treatment. As a result, my ability to function has been severely diminished. This is the first time in 3 years that I've attended and talked at a major public event. But Heather and I came here today because we want to say personally and directly to you and through you to all the people of Northern Ireland, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for your warmth, your hospitality, your generosity. We love Northern Ireland, the people and the place, and a very large part of our hearts and of our emotions will forever be with you. In approving the agreement by overwhelming majorities in a free and democratic election, the people of Northern Ireland and of Ireland showed others the possibility of hope. Within the word impossible is embedded the positive word possible. When you approved the agreement, you were also talking to Israelis and Palestinians, to Colombians, to Africans, to Asians, to Americans. In fact, you were talking to the world. This is an agreement for peace and for the future, not just here, but everywhere. We are living in fractured times. We need you. We need your ongoing patience, stamina, and perseverance. We need people who believe, who know that the possible does exist within the impossible. Don't let it slip away. May God grant you the opportunity and prosperity and everlasting peace you deserve. Thank you, Northern Ireland. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, Northern Ireland.
Whoa, follow that. Senator Mitchell, thank you so much for such a memorable address and for sharing your wisdom with us. I think we also probably just got some sense of your charm and your humor that must have helped a lot in those long, long negotiations. I'm sure you'll all agree that it has been an absolute privilege to be in the audience this morning and to hear the different perspectives from our speakers. But I think I speak for everybody here when I say how truly honoured we are that Senator Mitchell has been with us today. Senator, we will long remember and be grateful for your skill, your patience, your determination, and your devotion. Can we have another round of applause just to say thank you to Senator Mitchell? Now, today's theme is reflect, and I'm sure that, like me, after listening to this morning's speakers, many of you have been thinking back about the last 24 years and just how much has changed in Northern Ireland. So now we've got the chance to hear some reflections from our first panel. It's called Building Bridges, the Two Governments. And in a few moments, I'll invite the panellists to join us on stage. They're led by our chair, Professor Mary McAleese, the former President of Ireland. And the Professor is joined by Paul Murphy, Lord Murphy, former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, by Tim O'Connor, former Secretary-General to the President of Ireland, Liz O'Donnell, a former Minister of State and representative of the Irish government in those negotiations, and Jonathan Powell, the lead British negotiator on the agreement. So please join me in welcoming them all on stage.